The Riders Are the Gods by Winslow Swan. Audiobook narrated and produced by Edward James Beesley. Chapter 1. Jake Stoker burst into the apartment, his gun at the ready. A thin bead of sweat dripped from his forehead as he braced himself for the firefight that was sure to follow. His hand was calm and steady. The gun felt good and solid, ready to take down whatever threat was before him. The room was bathed in darkness. Jake could only make out the shadows of the furniture. Nothing was moving. The lights from the streets filtered through the curtains of the window. A moment later, his eye had adjusted, and he could make out the form of a person lying on the sofa. Instantly, a light from the table next to the form was switched on, and Jake was momentarily blinded. Jake waited for the gunshot and the pain of the bullet that would enter his body, throwing him backwards into the hallway.
I could have killed you, but I have something more interesting in mind.
The voice was soft and silky. The body was stretched out. A thin leotard clung to the curves, and the long, black hair hung down just below the breasts. Jake marveled at the beauty of the woman, his hand replacing the gun back into its holster. Her smile caught him in its web as he closed the door.
I want you, Jake. Now,
she said, her hands beginning to take off the leotard. Jake took out his gun and shot her through her right eye. Grinning, he left the room and went home.
So why did you make Jake shoot the young woman?
Dr. Theo Masters sat in the leather chair opposite his client. The papers that he had just finished reading lay in his lap. His cherub face looked as if it were deep in thought as he studied the young man that sat opposite him.
That was what I was trying to tell you, Dr. Masters. What you were reading is not what I had written down.
Well, it is what's written down now,
Dr. Masters said, glancing at the papers again.
Why don't you begin at the beginning?
He told the young man.
You know who I am. Of course, one of the greatest mystery and suspense writers of the 21st century, Mr. Conroy. At least that's what I've been led to believe.
Frank Conroy let his shoulders slump. His face, though only 24 years old, had the look of a man of 50. The lines near his eyes were more pronounced, and the puffiness showed that he had not slept in a very long time. His clothes were rumpled, and although he had always been photographed clean-shaven, his chin had considerable hair, much of it greying.
Doctor, I've written 27 novels, most of which have landed at #1 on the New York Times bestseller lists. All of them have to do with Jake Stoker, a hard-nosed detective, much like Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer. There is even talk of doing a series of movies of which the producers have asked me to write the screenplays. Mr. Conroy, I don't see what Please, just let me finish. I came to you because...
Frank's voice caught and he swallowed hard.
Because I think I'm going crazy.
The wall of the office was lined with accolades and diplomas from leading schools. Pictures of family adorned the desk. The lighting was soft and gentle, and the furnishings were very comfortable. The leading psychologist in the city, well respected and most admired, sat and waited.
Mr. Conroy, that is a very relative term, and one that I do not care to use.
Frank took a deep breath.
It all began about 3 weeks ago.
Chapter 2.
So Frank, how's the new manuscript coming along?
Bart Sims cut into the large and juicy steak as he eyed his client. He was the best agent in the world and counted his many blessings when he had signed Frank Conroy 3 years ago. Now he was sitting across from the most acclaimed writer of mystery and detective fiction, eating at the best restaurant in the city and driving the latest car that was available.
I was thinking about doing something different,
Frank said, picking at the rainbow trout that he had ordered but had not really wanted.
Different? Well, what do you mean by different?
Bart said, stopping his normal chewing. Different was a word that made him cringe inside. Different meant that the money train that he was riding on with this author might grind to a halt, which could possibly put him back into the one-bedroom apartment in the 76 Volvo. Different was a much-hated word to Bart.
I mean, Frank started again, that I'm getting a little tired of coming up with crimes for Jake to solve. It's starting to get boring. Well, I don't think 20 million copies of Hellstorm could ever be boring. Besides, Paramount is waiting to see the first draft of the screenplay. Yeah, I know. I thought I might try a courtroom drama or, something like that.
Bart swallowed hard.
And what do you know about courtrooms?
Bart asked.
Nothing, but I could learn. I have an idea for a character who...
Bart cut him off.
Look, Frank, I'm your agent. I shop around for the best contracts. I make sure that the book tours are all laid out. I make the hotel reservations, and I make sure that the checks are all on time. Now, why do you want to go and grouse up a great relationship?
Frank looked at Bart. He wondered why his agent, and perhaps his only friend, could not understand the importance of what he was saying.
I'm drying up, Bart. I'm running out of gas, and Jake is, spit it out, Frank. Boring, okay? The character's become very boring, and I'm ready to move on to something else. Well, then, give him a sex change,
Bart said as he cut another piece of the steak.
Right, and that will make it all better? No, Bart, I'm very serious about this. Fine, then do me one favor. Finish the screenplay and the new manuscript, kill Jake off in the end, and then you can write a romance novel for all I care. Thanks for being so understanding.
Chapter 3. Frank sat at the antique desk that he had purchased with the very first royalty check. It had been something that he had always wanted, and with the success of the first Jake Stoker novel, Tale of the Tigress, he had been able to. With each successive book, the checks became larger, and eventually he found himself in a townhouse apartment in the higher-rent downtown area. The light from the computer glowed in front of him. Smoke from a Cuban cigar wafted up from an ashtray. He stared at the blank page from the Microsoft Word program. Only the title stared back at him. It wasn't that he was out of ideas. That was only the excuse that he had used for his agent. As far as excuses went, it was the best and the easiest one to use. Frank had a much bigger problem. And right now, it was scaring the hell out of him. He closed the Word program down, moving the cursor over the desktop. He clicked on a document file which opened immediately. He read the paragraphs, the same ones that he had read the night before.
It's not what I wrote,
he muttered to himself. Chapter 4. Jake Stoker's jaw was set hard. His eyes were narrowed into small slits, and his features belied the storm that was brewing behind the face. I didn't have to kill her, he said. I just wanted to show you that you can't control me anymore. Frank stopped typing abruptly. He rubbed his eyes hard before glancing back at the computer screen.
Wait a damn minute, he said as he reread his words. That's not what you're supposed to say. I wrote that you stare hard down at the dark alley, knowing the killer is waiting. Besides, you weren't supposed to kill the girl. Damn it, what the hell is going on?
I told you. The words on the computer began to type out. You are not in control of me anymore. Face it, Frank. For 27 novels, I have been on the front line. I've been beaten, shackled, kidnapped, drowned, burned, shot. I don't remember how many times. And frankly, Frank, I've had it.
Oh, man, this has to be a nightmare, Frank tried to reason. Look, you, Frank pointed at the screen. I'm the writer. I decide what you say, how you say it, and only me. You don't have any control here. In this world, I am God.
Yeah, well, even God has his problems. And right now, you have one great big one. I don't want to do this anymore, Jake told him. Jake took the gun from the holster and set it onto the pavement of the street. He looked up into the sky and screamed, "I quit!"
Frank waited, dumbfounded.
Quit?
He asked.
Quit?
He shouted at the screen.
You can't quit! I won't let you!
Frank began typing the keys in a mad frenzy. His mind was racing away at the storyline that he had thought up, his fingers barely able to keep up with his thoughts. He was putting Jake into harm's way again, meeting the killer in a final showdown where Jake would get knocked around, but in the end triumph. With his breath coming in large gulps of air, Frank sat back in the chair, smiling to himself. That would show him, he thought. His breathing stopped abruptly in horrified shock as he looked down at the computer screen and the words that should have been there. Instead, the words, "I quit!" kept repeating over and over. Frank, at that point, was sure that he was losing his mind. Chapter 5. The old typewriter sat on the desk beside the computer which Frank had unplugged. A stack of newly brought paper lay beside it.
There now. Let's see you quit this,
Frank said to the empty room. He rolled a fresh sheet into the machine and began to bang away at the keys furiously. He had decided on a short story in which Jake would be thrust headlong into the world of gangsters and gun moles. Jake would, of course, be knocked out by the bad guy, and just when everything seemed the bleakest, Jake would come out on top again. Frank got to the end of the first page where Jake was just getting ready to have his gun knocked out of his hand by the burly assassin when he pulled the page from the typewriter. His throat seized up, and he could feel the sweat beading on his forehead. His hands began to shake uncontrollably as he looked at the words on the page. The same thing as last night, only this time there was no way that a hacker could have gotten into it, as Frank had tried to reason before pulling the plug on the computer. In large, bold print were the words, "I quit!" over and over again. Chapter 6.
Which is why I came to see you,
Frank told his psychiatrist, who was giving him a credulous stare.
Well?
The doctor looked away thoughtfully for a moment before saying anything.
I believe,
he said,
that you yourself are responsible for the writing on the paper. But Doc! No, let me finish. You have subconsciously said to yourself that enough is enough. Even though you believe that you have written some story complete with characters and plot, you are actually typing the words, "I quit," over and over again. You no longer want to be a writer, or perhaps you no longer want to write about the same character. So you have done these things, but have convinced yourself that you have not. That is what I thought at first,
Frank said slowly.
That is until Jake Stoker walked into my apartment.
The doctor sat up a little straighter. Chapter 7. The knock was loud and firm. The door to Frank's apartment shook under the force of it. Frank had laid the paper on the desk with the incriminating words before getting the bottle of brandy from the cupboard and drinking himself into a stupor. He thought that someone was at the door, but his alcohol-fogged mind could not connect the proper synapse to get his body to move towards it to find out who could be knocking.
"Frank!"
The voice from outside the door called out.
"I know you're in there."
More banging, louder and stronger, that made Frank's head throb.
Go away!
Frank shouted. The shoe was custom-made. That much Frank could distinguish as the foot came crashing through the door. The gun that the man held looked very familiar. "We need to talk," the man with the gun said as he closed the door back. Frank sat up, now more sober than he had been a moment ago.
Who are you?
He asked.
"Don't you know? You created me,"
the man with the gun said as he put the deadly weapon back into the shoulder holster.
Jake? No, but that can't be.
Oh, yes, it can. Now I know that I told you I quit, but it seems that I really don't have a say-so in the matter,
Jake told him, walking over to the bar and pouring a large whiskey, gulping it down.
What are you talking about?
Frank asked, bewilderment clouding his eyes.
You,
Jake answered, pointing at him.
really are some sort of god. Unlike all gods, you have created an entire world that is filled with people and places and, well, everything.
I don't understand,
Frank muttered.
If I quit, all of that goes away. All the characters from Stratton, the police commissioner that you always have me go up against, to Johnny Ray, my only friend. They all disappear, and are never heard from again.
No, that's not true. Most of them they're all in the books. Don't you see, Jake? As long as someone reads the books, you're still around, and all the others.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But without new stories, we get stuck in the same ones over and over again. They told me to tell you that you have to keep writing, or else.
Frank didn't like where he was going.
You see,
Jake began again.
You are the only one that is trying to quit, not me. And I just can't allow that to happen.
Jake pulled the gun from the holster and aimed it at Frank. Chapter 8.
But you are here, in my office,
Dr. Masters said.
Am I? Or am I just a character from some writer's imagination? Maybe we all are. Even you,
Frank said. Dr. Masters turned and stared out at the city below him. So many people with so many problems, and he was only one man. Why was he doing this, he thought to himself.
I'm very disappointed in you,
Dr. Masters said, turning back to the man in the chair.
Me?
Frank asked.
Yes, I thought that you would be better, but unfortunately you are like all the others. What others? Doctor, I don't know what you're talking about,
Frank said, becoming afraid for the first time.
You are boring,
the doctor said, standing up and stretching.
And I have had just about enough of you.
Frank watched in horror as the doctor sat back down. He saw the familiar wave of the fingers across the computer keyboard, an action that he himself had performed many times.
What are you doing?
Frank asked, knowing the answer. The doctor smiled and said,
I'm deleting you.
With a click of the button on the keyboard, Frank Conroy disappeared. The doctor shut down the computer and picked up the phone.
Hello?
The doctor began.
Hello,
he said again.
Sorry, Doc, there isn't anyone there. Who the hell is this?
The doctor said, realizing that the voice wasn't coming from the phone, but from somewhere above him.
Oh, you are right, Doc. It is coming from above you. I am all around you.
The doctor began to fear the creeping sensation of abject fear. This was not right, he thought to himself.
Oh, yes, it is, Dr. Masters. Who are you?
He said in a hushed whisper.
I am your creator, the one that gave you life, the one that told you that you were also a writer. However, you have been a great disappointment to me. I can do better. Please. Sorry, but you are being deleted.
Epilogue. The butler did it.
Have you heard any good books lately? Audiobooks from Winslow Swan, now available on Spotify.
You can help support the channel and visit our merchandise store. T-shirts, caps, mugs, and so much more. Now available at doorwaytonightmare.com.
Hey guys, this is Crimson.
And this is Swan. And we'd love to know what you think of the stories.
Even if it's bad.
So leave us a comment.
or give us a thumbs up.
Thank you.